It's just after I see a movie, I like to go get a piece of pie and talk about it. It's sort of a little tradition I have. Do you like to get pie after you see a good movie?
Hey, everybody, welcome back to A Piece of Pie, the queer film podcast. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm here with my friend and contributor, Lauren. Hello.
Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm so excited for this episode. I feel like when you did Gone Girl, Mulholland Drive with James and I knowing that you were a fan of Nora Ephron, I was like, we need to do a Nora Ephron episode.
I was going to say this episode has been years in the making, and I am so excited we are finally getting to do it.
Absolutely, me too. And I'm sure you clicked the link if you're listening and you know that we're covering When Harry Met Sally and Sleepless in Seattle, but that was your official confirmation that that's what we're talking about. As always, we're going to start with the movie that came out first, which honestly is one of my favorite movies of all time, When Harry Met
Mine
Sally.
too.
I watch this movie every holiday season. I usually watch it sometime between Christmas and New Year's because there's a lot of Christmas stuff and the big ending is on New Year's. And it always just puts me in that mood, that holiday like mood.
I've been at my parents' house more than once. I do not have a television, so I don't really like flip through channels because I can't. But when I'm at my parents' house, this has happened at least twice. When we're flipping channels and When Harry Met Sally is on, we know what we're doing for the next 2 hours. It's like, okay, drop everything. It's When Harry Met Sally. And it is that kind of movie. You're right. Like, it puts you in the holiday spirit, even though it's not a holiday movie per se. And I know we were texting about this, but it has not lost a thing since 1989. And that is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. Just as a brief description about the movie, if you don't know, and if you don't know, you should, because you should watch it. It basically follows Harry and Sally. They meet kind of a couple times over the course of their lives. And then finally they become friends in New York City when they're adults and professionals and living out their adulthood, and become very close friends who end up hooking up. And spoiler alert, they end up together. Well, so we're pairing this with Sleepless in Seattle. So they're both Nora Ephron.
Yes.
This was her first original screenplay. She had done one for Heartburn, based on her own book.
Right.
This movie, it's a perfect storm of talent, and like Nora Ephron. You and I've said this to you. Imagine being on set with Nora Ephron and Carrie Fisher.
I think my head and heart would have exploded simultaneously. And I will say this, you are a writer as well. I am a writer. And we know how hard it is to write good banter. It is fucking difficult. Like, that cannot be stressed enough. And both of these movies, but When Harry Met Sally especially, are full of banter, and it is absolutely beautiful. And just the way I think, as I've gotten older and the more I've watched this movie, I appreciate more and more just how well that is crafted. And that's to say nothing of the delivery, which is always perfect, but it's just, she can fucking write banter. And you can't say that for many people.
And the great thing about it, and it's what I love about great dialogue, is it sounds like how you think people should talk.
Yes.
Right? Like, it's not how people really talk, because not everybody is this smart and intelligent and witty.
Right.
But it's that kind of just that pitch perfect dialogue. And yeah, the delivery is perfect. Everybody is perfectly cast. I almost feel like we should have had on someone who's never seen it or something to give some perspective. We did that last week with Matthew with Magnolia, and it was a lot of fun.
Nice. I love Magnolia. I feel like it would have been very hard to have someone our age on who hasn't seen it, though, because, and I texted you this, I find it really interesting how I know so many people our age who love this movie, despite the fact that we were all children when it came out. A lot of people I know who love this movie do not view love and romance and marriage the same way the characters do in this movie. you know, in a lot of ways, because it's a very generational thing. Like our generation thinks of these things differently. I have friends who love this movie who are divorced, who are, you know, queer, hence piece of pie, and yet who still just, when I was putting it on my Instagram stories that I was watching and I put 2 different shots of the movie, I immediately got people responding to me like, oh my God, this is the perfect movie. And it is in so many ways. And I think, you know, yeah, one of the things is the dialogue. This is how you would ideally want people to talk. Everyone's intelligent and funny, even when they're being annoying. The cast is just insane because, yeah, you have fucking Carrie Fisher just in this supporting role, knocking it out of the park. And oh my God.
Let's take a moment just to kind of list the cast. Again, if you don't know this movie, please turn this off and go watch it. It is streaming on HBO Max. So you have no excuse. But the cast, so the leads, of course, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan. Carrie Fisher plays Meg Ryan's best friend. Bruno Kirby plays Billy Crystal's best friend.
Yes. And neither Carrie or Bruno are with us anymore.
I know.
R.I.P.
That's really sad.
They were both, you know, both had really good careers too. Bruno did The Godfather 2, I believe. And, you know, Carrie is Carrie and she's our space mom. And they do not come in. Those 2 characters don't come in until 30 minutes into the movie, which is so interesting considering what a small cast this is.
That's one of the things that I was noticing even when I was writing it down, because I make a lot of notes for these episodes and things, and how small the cast list was. It's basically those 4 people.
It's almost like a play in that way, where it's a small cast. There's a lot of like one-on-one interaction or like 2-on-1. There are not a lot of just like big group scenes. And even when there are, we're concentrating on like 2 people talking at, you know, in case you haven't seen the movie, the best friends, Jess and Marie, end up hooking up on a double date when they are respectively set up by Harry and Sally with Harry and Sally. And they get married, and there is a very big confrontation between Harry and Sally at the wedding that is just heartbreaking and also kind of funny.
I'm gonna actually since we're talking about this, I'm going to put a little bit of that scene in.
Perfect.
And that's my prompt, and I'll see you on the other side. It'll be very short.
Love it.
How have you been?
Fine.
Are you seeing anybody?
Harry.
What?
I don't want to talk about this.
Why not?
I don't want to talk about it.
Why can't we get past this? I mean, are we gonna carry this thing around forever?
Forever. It just happened.
It happened 3 weeks ago. You know how a year to a person is like 7 years to a dog?
Yes? Is one of us supposed to be a dog in this scenario?
Yes.
Who is the dog?
You are.
I am. I am the dog.
Mm-hmm.
I am the dog. I don't see that, Harry. If anybody is the dog, you are the dog. You want to act like what happened didn't mean anything.
I'm not saying it didn't mean anything. I am saying, why does it have to mean everything?
Because it does. And you should know that better than anybody, because the minute that it happens, you walk right out the door.
I didn't walk out.
No, sprinted is more like it.
We both agreed it was a mistake.
The worst mistake I ever made.
What do you want from me?
I don't want anything from you.
Fine, but let's just get one thing straight. I did not go over there that night to make love to you. That is not why I went there. But you looked up at me with these big weepy eyes. Don't go home tonight, Harry. Hold me a little longer, Harry. What was I supposed to do?
What are you saying? You took pity on me?
No, I was...
Fuck you.
I am the dog. I am the dog.
I am the dog. I am the dog. She's, I mean, I have actually been compared to Meg Ryan at several points in my life. And I really hope they're talking about When Harry Met Sally, Meg Ryan, because her delivery of lines like I am the dog is just perfect.
Yeah.
And it's, I can't imagine those lines being said any other way. And every time I watch this movie, I also realize not only how much I quote these lines, but how much it's sort of affected like just how I view not just my romantic relationships, but my friendships as well. Just like I have always loved a person I can talk to the way Harry and Sally talk to one another. And looking at the people I've really connected with over the years and the people who stayed in my life, it is people who are weird like me, who have their little quirks that get annoying at times, just like my quirks get annoying, but that I can just talk to. And I really love Billy Crystal's, like, I love when Harry is telling Jess, like, why he values his friendship with Sally. He says, I can just be myself. And I think the older we get, the more we realize how rare that is. And yeah.
I think that speaks to a lot of why it has sort of this queer following, because
that's a good point.
It really is just him. One of the great things about the movie, one of the notes that I wrote, and it all goes back to what we've been talking about in terms of like the dialogue and the cast and the delivery. When you watch this movie, you're watching these two people fall in love.
Yes.
And you watch it over, at first they really don't like each other.
Oh, not at all.
And then they kind of like, she's putting up with him in the airplane, which all of that, God, like is so perfectly like staged and written. And like I said, it all goes back. But at the end of the day, it's the characters. It's the writing that keeps us coming back. And the reason we can't imagine anyone other than Meg Ryan saying, I am the dog, is because that's not Meg Ryan. That's Sally Albright.
Sally, it's Nora. Yeah. And it's supposedly, from what I've read on IMDb, so take it with a grain of salt, like Nora really based Sally on herself. Like she's in some ways, like she kind of orders that way in restaurants. She based Harry a little bit on Rob Reiner, because he had an obsession with death. And it's just so funny, like watching these two people interact. And it's both very unique and just very like, you relate to just, having someone who you can talk to like that. I probably didn't put that very well, but I do want to talk about like the watching them fall in love. I think that is a really good thing you said. And I want to add that I noticed the first time that the director of photography is Barry Sonnenfeld, who is a filmmaker and
who also, by the way, before this did movies with the Coen brothers.
Oh, yep. That makes sense. And I totally knew that now that you said that, because I was like, I know I've seen that guy's name a lot. And
well, he also directed Get Shorty.
Yeah, because he
became
a director.
Yeah.
And I just love the composition of a lot of the shots. The locations are beautiful. There is a lot of autumn in New York. And I read on IMDb, and I love this, that they deliberately made the locations beautiful because Harry and Sally are in these beautiful settings falling in love, and we can see it and they cannot. And I think that's another just brilliant thing about this film is it's really lovely. And if they just, as much as we love to hear them talk, if they just stopped talking and looked around, it would be like, oh my God, like we're in a love story. But what's great is just, they don't know it until the end. And oh man, I felt like I'm like, this podcast is going to be a lot of us going, I love this and this and this.
Yeah,
but that's how you talk about When Harry Met Sally.
Yeah. It feels very, and it's funny too, watching this now, in 2021, I remember the first, so like, this is my like weird When Harry Met Sally story is that like,
oh good, we're going to trade these. I'm very excited.
Perfect.
Perfect.
But basically the first time I saw this, my parents, I don't know if it was if it was my mom or my dad, they brought it home, they rented it, and we watched this movie. I didn't get it. They laughed a lot. And I remember thinking too, like, I feel like I laughed at a few points, just as a child, but I also like, of course, that diner scene, which we'll get to.
Oh my God.
I remember just being like, what the fuck is going on?
I can picture that, like, little 10-year-old you just being like, why is she making these noises?
I was like 11 years old. I was, as a male, no one bothered to explain to me what a female orgasm was.
Well, no.
So my earliest memory of watching this movie is watching this and being like, what the fuck is happening? And then later my parents apparently loved it because it was purchased and we had a VHS copy of it. And there was a period of time where we didn't have very many VHS movies, so we just watched the same ones over and over again. And this was one of them. Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 were other ones, but those are conversations for other episodes.
I really love that as a trilogy. Yeah, When Harry Met Sally, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. Like,
Top Gun was in there.
Oh yes, Top Gun.
Yeah.
Top Gun's also very homoerotic. So, yeah.
Oh, we will be covering Top Gun on this podcast.
I was going to say, I'm kind of surprised you have not already.
Well, there's a sequel coming out, so I'm going to try and time it, if anything.
So in my case, I remember when my parents went to this movie, they went in the theater. My family goes to the movies a lot. We've probably talked about that on other episodes, but this one, I went to my grandma's house because they were not taking their fourth grader to see When Harry Met Sally, but I distinctly remember the TV spots for this movie because Billy Crystal said the word sex in them. And, when you are 9 years old and in fourth grade in Catholic school, sex is not a word you hear very often, but you don't know exactly what it means, but like sex. Oh my God. So I knew there was sex in the movie and I was very intrigued, but naturally they would tell me nothing about it except that they really liked it. So fast forward about 10 and a half years, I'm 20 years old and I'm sort of in this flirtation with a guy who is not the guy I'm dating. That is also the summer I became friends with Piece of Pie contributor Rob Cameron. And so this guy and we bantered a lot. That was how we flirted. It was not Nora Ephron banter. It was not even close. But he said to me, this is like When Harry Met Sally. And I said, I've never seen it. And he said, I am bringing it over. So I watched When Harry Met Sally with a guy that I was not dating. Needless to say, I purchased the movie myself. I actually did at least one paper on it that next year in college because I was a communications major. So, and I think I took a class on like gender communication. And so I showed the Men and Women Can't Be Friends clip. And I, to this day, one of my very favorite movies. The guy I'm dating and the guy I wasn't dating neither are still in my life, but When Harry Met Sally remains. And that is the important thing.
That's great.
One of the best movies of all time. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good.
But this is why too that I wanted to have. I was just talking earlier. I was like, it'd be nice to have someone who hadn't seen it before. Like, what if you hadn't? Because I do. I all of my notes are gushing, and I'm like, I do. My notes for Sleepless in Seattle are not as kind.
I get that, and I think like that is a much less universal situation than having a very intimate friendship, having a crush on your friend, maybe hooking up with a friend and it not going well, or falling in love with your friend. I think maybe it is a really When Harry Met Sally is still very universally loved, even among us who are not straight and are not married and did not like fall in love with our best friend, because the experiences I mentioned above, most of us have like had one of those things or more. There is the scene when Harry and Sally have a fight outside of their friends. Their friends Jess and Marie have quickly fallen in love, have moved in together, and Harry has just run into his ex-wife. No, I'm sorry. You're talking about one of the notes was
that I wrote down was my opinion of the wheel wagon coffee table has evolved over time.
Interesting, because I still hate it, but
I mean, for him with like a leather recliner, like I get it, I see it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Jess and Marie are moving in together, then that is one of those things where she says, like, if we had a whole other room for just your stuff.
Yes.
I'm on your side. I'm just trying to help you have good taste.
I have good taste.
Everybody thinks they have good taste and a sense of humor, but they couldn't possibly all have good taste.
You know, it's funny. We started out like this, Ellen and I. We had blank walls, we hung things, we picked out tiles together. Then you know what happens? 6 years later, you find yourself singing Surrey with a fringe on top in front of Ira!
Do we have to talk about this right now?
Yes, I think that right now actually is the perfect time to talk about this because I want our friends to benefit from the wisdom of my experience. Right now, everything is great. Everyone is happy, everyone is in love, and that's wonderful. But you gotta know that sooner or later, you're gonna be screaming at each other about who's gonna get this dish. This $8 dish will cost you $1,000 in phone calls to the legal firm of That's Mine, This Is Yours.
Harry.
Please. Jess, Marie, do me a favor for your own good. Put your name in your books right now before they get mixed up and you don't know whose is whose. Because someday, believe it or not, you'll go 15 rounds over who's gonna get this coffee table. This stupid, wagon wheel, Roy Rogers garage sale coffee table.
I thought you liked it.
I was being nice!
Dialogue like that, I think, it feels very like Neil Simon, almost Seinfeldian. And that like that moment where like Bruno Kirby is like, well, when someone says she has a personality, a good personality, you always say she's beautiful, but then there's that whole conversation and the way it's not just that like Nora Ephron is like wittily writing this dialogue, she's writing this dialogue that examines the way people talk.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly right. That entire conversation that they have is exactly right.
It is.
If someone's like, I'm trying to set you up with someone, like
you're automatically gonna think what Bruno Kirby thinks. Can I also say that I read it in a magazine, I wrote that has now happened to me, which
that's amazing.
Was one of the most rewarding moments of my life. And of course, I thought of this movie and I was just like, honestly, ever since I became a writer, because of that line, when Marie says, you know, restaurants in the 80s are what theater was in the 60s. I read that in a magazine and Bruno Kirby says, I wrote that. Ever since like I started writing in my late 20s, I was like, I want that to happen to me someday. And eventually it did. It's happened more than once.
That's
and
amazing.
It is just, it's one of the most wonderful things. So thank you, Nora Ephron, for like planting that dream in my head and then making it all the more rewarding when it came true. I want to talk about the fight outside the apartment.
Yes.
About the wagon wheel coffee table with Harry and Sally when he has just run into his ex and now he is having to watch his best friend move in with somebody like he maybe not just met, but Jess and Marie move in together very quickly.
I think it's like 4 months. It says like 4 months later.
And that is quick.
Is that also like, is that like a straight thing? Maybe, or was it a straight thing in the 80s? Maybe like was 4 months like
York thing too.
I don't even know. Or maybe it is. It's because nobody ever remarks on how quickly it's all happening. And they're like, oh, well, of course they're getting married. They met 4 months ago.
I think it's a straight thing. Although I know gay couples who have moved in after 4 months, although it did not end well. I think it's a straight thing. I think it's they are in their 30s and at that point are...
Your standards are lower. You're like, this biological clock is ticking.
No.
You're doing that Marissa Tomei thing.
I think it is they are both looking for endgame and pretty much like sense that in one another. Like,
yeah.
I feel like, especially because the wedding, like, you know, happens basically in that same year. It's kind of like, it's just one of those relationships that moved really fast. I have also known of and heard about couples in New York who do move in together quickly if someone's lease runs out, because New York real estate's a bitch. But yeah, so the coffee table that Harry throws a fit about saying they are eventually going to break up and be fighting over this stupid coffee table because, of course, the rant is not about his friends at all. It is about him never having fully dealt with his divorce. But of course, you know, Sally is cringing because this is not the thing you say to your friends who are literally moving in together at that moment. So he goes outside, she follows him, is kind of like, you know, what the hell is this? Then he starts ragging on her. And it is one of those fights that I haven't necessarily had with, I probably had with someone I'm dating, but I remember those fights the most that I've had with my very close friends who we know each other very well and we know each other well enough to hurt. Yeah. You know what to say to really get to that person. Harry and Sally kind of both do that in that fight. And then the way he ends it, can I say something? And she says, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. And it's just that whole, it's just beautiful writing to me. Yeah. Because it's so real where you and this person who probably like knows you better than anyone in the world, you guys are fighting about something, but you're fighting about different things. Yeah. Like you're not really fighting about the coffee table. Yeah. And all the things come in and then suddenly it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, why are we doing this? You know, and I fucked up. And so sorry, go ahead.
No. I had a relationship that went on for a while and I said to him it probably more than once, like, you're going to have to figure out a way to feel what you're feeling without expressing or whatever that line is. I can't think of it right now.
Yeah, it's basically something like, you know, you're going to have to learn to deal with your divorce in a better way than you are currently dealing, which is, you know, essentially sleeping around New York and then like yelling at your friends.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Cause you fucked every woman in New Jersey.
Sorry. And I don't,
you're going to have to, I'm sorry. You're going to have to move back to New Jersey because you fucked every woman in New York. And I don't see that turning Helen into a faint memory for you. And yes, Queen.
Yes, Queen. And the thing before that where she says, Harry, you are going to have to learn not to express every thought you have the second that you have it.
That was the quote that I was trying to remember that I misremembered. So thank you. And
it's so good because, first of all, I have had to learn that as a person. I have more or less said that to other people. And it's just it's both such a universal thing and such a like personal thing to Harry and Sally's relationship that it's just again, it's Nora, it's flawless writing.
Yeah. To continue on with the writing, one of the notes that I had was just that it's this perfect example of this is what an R-rated movie should be, right? Like this is an adult movie in the sense that like I watched this movie, so it came out in '89. By the time we got it on VHS, my family ran a little late, so I want to say 91. So I was probably about 11 when I saw it. For that earlier story. So I shouldn't have been watching it, but that's not the point. The point is that it's there's swearing and there's like that, obviously that orgasm scene, and there's frank talk about sex, but it's not, I feel like this is how people talk.
Yeah.
It's not unrealistic.
It's not, we're going to put in, because I feel like this was also the era of like sex scenes being shoehorned into everything that was PG-13 and above. And sometimes it was really awkward. And well, a lot of times it was really awkward because intimacy coordinators were definitely not a thing. And it sometimes just, it didn't feel like if it was an action movie, a lot of times it didn't feel like the leads had any chemistry.
Right.
Or anything like that. But here, you're exactly right. Like these are adults behaving like adults, which, you know, not always perfectly, but adults in adult situations without it being like, ooh, adult situations. You know?
This was a period in time when if you have an R-rated, if your movie was going to be R-rated, you put some boobs in it.
You had to put boobs in it. Yeah.
Put boobs in it. I mean, an orgasm at a deli, I would say, is on par. It's certainly in 1989, which is honestly, what I'm saying is I feel like that scene is why it's rated R.
Oh, 100% because the sex scene is not. There's not really a sex scene.
No, there is no nudity, and there's no real sex.
Yeah, they talk about sex, but like, yeah, that's not necessarily gonna get you an R. I was thinking about this too, and I was thinking, I'm like, the R rating is because of the orgasm scene,
right? But they take that orgasm scene and they, I don't know, like all of the other stuff around it is it's not that nudity for nudity's sake or gratuitous violence for gratuitous violence sake. They say fuck a few times because adults say fuck once in a while. Say fuck. Yeah, I say it a lot. I work at a bar, so so I say it a lot. Not everybody, but people. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. Like it earns also, its R rating in that way.
It does.
It's not gratuitous.
What I love about the orgasm scene is, like you just said, it's not gratuitous. Which, this was the era of gratuitous. It's not gratuitous, and it's also the context of the orgasm scene is also a conversation that people have. And it's a very legitimate, it is a very legitimate takedown of how straight men, I mean, I have thought, as someone who dates straight men, I have thought of this scene so many times where every woman has faked it and every man thinks a woman never has with him. So you do the math.
Yes.
And I will say, without going too much into my personal life, I will say that I have not faked it in years, which I attribute to I've had a lot of lovely partners that, my judgment has just gotten better with age, where it was not always so good. But, it is very true. Like, straight men, someone has faked it with you. If there are any straight men that listen to this podcast, just know that. And it's not the worst thing in the world, but maybe keep in mind that if Sally Albright can fake an orgasm that good in Katz's Delicatessen, then someone can do it in bed pretty easily. Can I also say that I briefly had a thing with a divorced guy in New York, and one night we were walking around and he said, "Do you recognize this place?" And I said, "Oh my God, is this?" And he said, "Yes, this is the deli from When Harry Met Sally." And you can see why I had a thing with him.
Yeah. Apparently that specific booth there's some kind of it's set aside or something, right? Is it not?
Yeah.
You were there. But there's a sign on it or something.
We didn't go inside. We were outside of it. That was all I needed, really. And it was really busy. But I believe I have heard that. And you know what? Yeah, there should be a shrine to that incredible moment of filmmaking and Meg Ryan and just, a siren call for straight men everywhere to do better.
Meanwhile, little 11-year-old Brian was like, what the fuck is happening?
I wish I could go back in time and watch 11-year-old Brian watch that scene for the first time and be like, what the fuck is happening?
If that is how you're using your time machine, you are misusing your time machine.
That is very true. That is very
true. Yeah, like I said, I really do think this is a movie that if there's nothing about it really that I would change. I really think that this is top 5, perfect movie.
Even Billy, I am the first to say I do not always like Billy Crystal. Yeah. I have seen City Slickers and I kind of hated it.
City Slickers, my family all went to see at the theater.
Oh my goodness.
One of my parents, I feel like Billy Crystal was someone that my parents could agree on.
He was the same with my parents. honestly. And I think like that was the era like of Billy Crystal.
Yeah.
Remember
when he hosted the Oscars like 79 times?
79 times. I think that is the precise number of times he hosted the Oscars. But yeah, it's like his humor has not necessarily aged well, but in this movie, I can't think of anyone else who would have been Harry Burns. Yeah. Like he's just so good. And yeah, you also, even if you like Billy Crystal, you don't look at Billy Crystal and go romantic leading man. But
they sure tried to make that happen though.
Oh, they sure tried to make it happen, and it didn't for a reason.
Right.
But here he is, again, like, you know, Nora Ephron's words, he delivers them perfectly. I believe him and Meg Ryan and their chemistry the whole time. Like, he straight up is making her laugh when he's talking in that ridiculous accent, and she looks off camera and Rob Reiner's like, just keep going. And she keeps going. And I love it. I love that they kept that in because it's such a genuine laugh from her. It's like, you're so fucking ridiculous. And I love this. And it's also just a very Sally Albright thing. It's like, I'm laughing in spite of myself. And this is just maybe not where I thought I'd be at this point in my life, but I am having fun. And it's delightful. It's just
like a moment. It's one of those moments where you can kind of feel them falling in love.
Yeah.
I feel like. I kind of think that Harry Burns is probably a combination of Rob Reiner and Billy Crystal, and Sally Albright is a combination of Meg Ryan and Nora Ephron.
And I think that's why it just works so beautifully. Is like, it's
because none of them are lying. Do you know what I mean? Like it's truthful.
It's truthful. It is that lightning in a bottle where it just, all the pieces came together. And I like the word truthful to describe the whole vibe of the movie. Like, again, like, we don't go around with these like witty bon mots all the time. I wish we did. But so much of it, there's still just a sense of like, this feels very real, even if this is not my exact situation. And I just, no matter how much you watch it, it's like, I'm going to go. And by the way, it is a tight 90 minutes, which I adore. And I wish more movies did that. And it just does everything it needs to do. And just every time I'm like, I'm going to go along with these characters and I'm going to laugh with them and I'm going to be sad with them. And I'm going to like listen to their witty banter and just be so happy when they finally love each other at the end, even though like I knew, because I've seen it a million times, I knew it was coming, but it's just when I just enjoy it, like every time I watch it. And I can't say that for a whole lot of movies.
Yeah, it's very much a movie where you put on to hang out with them, hang out with those characters, and to just spend 90 minutes with Carrie Fisher and Meg Ryan and Bruno Kirby and Billy Crystal and like literally nobody else. Oh, and Gerald Ford's son.
And Gerald Ford's son. Which my mom pointed out to me one of the first times I watched it. She's like, do you recognize him? And I'm like, no. And she's like, it's Gerald Ford's son. I'm like, oh my God, it is Gerald Ford's son. And also Rob Reiner's mother. Yeah.
I never would have known Gerald Ford's son had I not read it on the Internet Movie Database. But it's, that's another one of those like weird little things too, just while we're on the topic of Joe and Helen, the exes. I love that they are these two characters that so influence the action. Mm-hmm. And I also appreciate that they each get like this one scene where you can kind of like get a sense of who they are.
Yes.
Joe is kind of a piece of shit. Well, I will get one if it is important to you. Like,
he's just
I don't like him.
Slick. And you just know from the beginning, you're like, no, he is not the one for her, but she's probably going to think that for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I say this having, not that my ex was like Joe at all, but I did think he was the one for a very long time. I have also witnessed my friends in relationships where I think he is not the one, but you are going to be telling yourself that for a very long time, and hopefully you will not make it legal.
Yes.
And then Helen, the symptom is fucking my wife, which is a wonderful line.
That's a good line.
Yeah, Helen is a lawyer who keeps her name and eventually cheats on Harry with Ira. And then they run into each other in a sharper image, RIP, while Harry and Sally they have this singing machine, which I love that.
Yeah.
Singing Surrey with the Fringe on Top from Oklahoma, that is another just perfectly done scene, because especially when Harry just has no more words and Sally for a few seconds is just blithely going ahead with
yes. It's my voice, right? You hate my voice.
Right? And then it's just like, oh fuck, that's Helen. And it's a great scene. Yeah, both Joe and Helen like have their moments. And other than that, we mainly hear about them. And yeah, it's just, that's another, point in Nora Ephron's favor. It's like we get just enough of the exes. The rest of the time it's kind of filtered through their experience, which is also realistic because, when you get to know somebody, like even if you meet their ex at some point, like, it's going to be a very brief thing. Like you're mainly going to know them through the other person. And just so good.
I remember one of the special features on the DVD, because I, of course, had the special edition DVD.
Of course.
Now the digital copy, I don't think has any of the special features, so that's unfortunate. Because honestly, I went looking for it because I wanted to watch. But I remember an interview with Rob Reiner where he's talking about how people would ask him, like, how come the only thing they ever talk about is sex? How come they don't ever talk about their jobs or their other lives? And Rob Reiner was like, well, they do, but we're not showing that. Like, those aren't the scenes that are important for the movie. They have all of those conversations.
Oh, 1,000%. Because, like, you're not going to just talk about, like, even with, like, I do think, like, that's another thing where our generation, like, we talk about sex differently, like, we talk about it more openly, but you're still not going to have those conversations, not just about sex, but about, like, intimacy. And like, and again, like your exes and things like that, you're not going to have that with someone like you haven't talked with about like the mundane things in your life or things like your job and things like that. And, again, a testament to the filmmaking here and the like very tight editing is we get what we need to get from the conversations that we see. We can like, it's trusting the audience too, that we are smart enough to fill in the blanks to know that like, they call each other at 3 a.m. and watch Casablanca, like from their respective TVs. Like they talk about everything. Like they have this intimacy. And like when Harry says, I can just be myself. Yeah. He's not just referring to talking about sex. Like, I think he even says like, he can talk about anything with her. And, like he does talk about everything with her.
Yeah. You made a woman meow.
Best ending to a scene. Oh my God. Yeah. Also the fact that like they're at a sports, well, I think they're in a batting cage there, but I also love that like the dialogue heavy scenes like are often interspersed with like them at a sports game, like standing up and doing the wave between like him talking about his wife cheating on him. Yeah. And just also a testament to like men communicating too, where like the women are talking about like breakups over lunch, but no, like the guys have to like go do an activity. And I think I wrote about that in a college paper too. I'm like, this is what it takes to get like straight men. I didn't say straight men then, but like get straight men to talk about feelings is like they have to be at a fucking sports game.
I honestly never made that connection, but I do love that.
That's
incredible. I never made that connection, but you're right. Absolutely. No, absolutely. That's amazing. The scene at the Giant Stadium, the New York Giants, is that right?
I think so.
I don't I don't know. I don't know the football. I know baseball pretty well. I don't know the football at all.
I know none of
So I feel like that's the Jets. But I could be wrong. I love that scene. And the other scene that I wanted to talk about was there's a scene in the right after Harry and Sally have hooked up, where they each consecutively call Jess and Marie.
God.
And the way that was shot, like I think it's one of my favorite scenes in all of movie history. Specifically because in the DVD special features, they talked about it like it was shot like they're all like in a room together.
Really? I always wondered about that.
Not like they're all shooting it at the same time. They're probably not in a room together because I feel like they probably
right.
But they were all shooting it together. And it took more than, I don't have it in front of me, but it took more than 20 takes to get it exactly right.
I would believe that, but it would probably, that's smart that they shot it together though, because the rapid fire dialogue of that and just like the ping ponging off of one another, that would have taken even longer if they'd filmed it separately, and it would not have been as good. So, okay, I applaud Reiner for making that decision, because I'm sure it seemed like a pain in the ass at the time, but like, it's just the
Iconic.
End result was so perfect. But that scene does remind me of a play, because if it were a play, they would all be on stage at the same time. Like, so I think it's really smart that they all filmed it at the same time. And, again, like real life, of course, like a two-way, like four-way conversation, like on two different phones would not sound like that. But
well, sure.
But at the same time, yeah, just when you're getting two sides of everything and you're calling your separate friends, because of course, like after a weird night like that, you're gonna call your best friend.
Absolutely,
and be
yeah.
like,
well, especially then. Now you would just text them, I think. But
I don't know. I feel like even now though, it might be a text where it's like, can we talk on the phone? Because like, or can we like meet up? Because fuck, like I've got to talk about this. If you watch nothing else of When Harry Met Sally, and like, again, why would you watch nothing else of When Harry Met Sally? Watch that scene, because Brian is right. Like it's iconic. It is a testament to just, I know Reiner has not done the best work in the latter years, but it is a testament to like what a good film, what a good filmmaker does. And it's also just so fucking funny. Like, and also kind of fucking heartbreaking, because it's just, it didn't go the way they wanted it to. And, they didn't really know, they didn't expect it to go. Like, they didn't expect sex to happen. And it's also a little heartbreaking. And that's what's so wonderful about it. I say wonderful a lot when I am talking about When Harry Met Sally, I realize, but it fits.
Absolutely. One last thing I wanted to talk about in this movie that I love, and one of the things that I think makes it feel it feels so real and truthful. It's because you have these interludes with these couples telling these strange stories of how they met. And they're all
true, right?
They're all true stories that they heard while they were gathering and doing research for this film. They hired actors to act it out. Right. So I have to imagine Nora Ephron went and like made it funny, probably.
Right.
But some of them, they're really sweet, and I like how it ends on. And finally, when Harry and Sally get together, it ends with them talking about it and kind of going back and telling their story. And
also how like just the detail about them having the coconut cake with chocolate sauce on the side, because you don't want to soak the coconut, and it's very important to have it on the side. And I just realized this on my viewing of it this week, but it's also like that's kind of the first big quirk he notices about her is when they're driving from Chicago to New York together, like, and they don't really know each other. She gives this long, elaborate order at this roadside diner. The waitress is like, what the fuck? Harry is like, what the fuck? Then later on, it's touched on in the movie when they go on the double date with Jess and Marie. And he says like, oh, Sally's a really good orderer. And you can tell he believes it. Like, yeah, he's like, gassing her up for, you know, his friend Jess, but you can tell like he really believes it. Like, yeah, she's really good at this. And then at the very end, he's just like, yeah, you know, you want to have the chocolate sauce on the side. On the side is important. And it's such this lovely full circle moment, not only with the interludes of the couples, but just with like that part of Sally that at first he's just like, this is so weird. And then it's like, oh, this is something about her. And then it's like, you know, there's just so much love in that moment. Yeah. Like, yeah, she wants it on the side.
I love that. And he's like, even the chef didn't know how good it could be.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just, that's another moment where it's like, you're in love with her. Like,
yeah, that's what another moment where you just sort of like slowly see them falling in love with each other.
Yeah.
Over time. And I think that's why it works, is because it's that weird, it is that perfect lightning in a bottle storm of this cast, these writers and filmmakers. It's absolutely fantastic. And Nora Ephron would later go on to write and direct Sleepless in Seattle, which is what we're going to talk about. So before we head over to Sleepless in Seattle, I'm going to play my favorite of the couple interludes. I hope you like it too. It's definitely my favorite. And at one point when I was in college, this was my answering machine message.
I love that.
So I'm going to play that. And we'll see you on the other side to talk about Sleepless in Seattle.
Well, he was a head counselor at the boys' camp, and I was a head counselor at the girls' camp. And they had a social one night, and he walked across the room. I thought he was coming to talk to my friend Maxine, because people were always crossing rooms to talk to Maxine. But he was coming to talk to me. And he said,
I'm Ben Small of the Coney Island Smalls.
At that moment, I knew. I knew the way you know about a good melon.
Welcome back. We're talking now about my second favorite Nora Ephron movie, Sleepless in Seattle, written and directed by. This also stars Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks plays a widower who, I literally just saying that, I thought of her line in the movie.
Yes! Why don't you say you're widowered?
Yeah. His son calls a radio call-in show because it was the 90s and people still did that. And Meg Ryan falls in love with him from across the country.
Yes, she is in Baltimore. He is in Seattle, hence Sleepless in Seattle, where he moved from Chicago with his young son, Jonah, because they lost Maggie, Sam's wife and Jonah's mother, to cancer. And Meg Ryan is Annie, who lives in Baltimore, is a news reporter, and is engaged to Walter, played by Bill Pullman, who has a lot of allergies, which is so funny in a 90s context, because I feel like now, like, you know, whether it's because of like hormones or evolution or whatever, like a lot of people are allergic to a lot of things, but in here, like, it is a very big deal that Walter is allergic to everything.
Well, it's a character quirk.
It's a character quirk, and
it's probably the only one he has, really. That's like his defining characteristic.
Yeah, and it's kind of what I like about Ephron's treatment of Walter, is that, like, he's not a bad guy. He's just he's not the one for her, you know. And granted, like, she probably would have come to that realization, like, with or without, you know, falling for Sam, although, like, she may have come to that realization after they were married. And so, yeah, at the very least, Sam has helped her dodge a bullet by being a sad widower with a son who calls in a radio show on Christmas Eve. By the way, I did not have time to look it up. Who is the voice of the radio doctor? Because she sounds super familiar.
Caroline Aaron.
Okay. That's also a name that sounds familiar. So probably like an 80s, 90s character actress, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I didn't write down any of her other credits, but I did write down her name.
Okay.
And honestly, I actually love her performance in this movie because the movie doesn't happen without her performance.
Oh, exactly. And she's got, like, you know, we're old enough to remember, like, those radio college shows, and she's got the perfect voice.
Delilah is still going, is she not?
Can I tell you, yes, she is very much still going. And can I tell you, I am an unironic fan of Delilah.
I think we've talked about this.
We have.
Yes.
She is, in case this has not made it onto the podcast in previous episodes, for me, I really bonded with Delilah from afar after a friend of mine took his own life. And for some reason, her voice and her corny songs were the only thing that helped me. I wrote a personal essay about her, and I said, if I were to call in, I would request this specific song, which was not on her regular rotation. About a week later, it came on one night. No comments or anything, but I'm like, I think she or someone on her team saw this, and that just always meant a lot to me. So yeah, that has been my Delilah tangent for the episode.
I love Delilah.
She's great. And yeah, it's a very specific kind of voice. And I think this actress does that really well.
Yeah.
Speaking of the cast, I did text you this. I noticed on the opening credits, the casting director for this is Juliet Taylor, who was done Woody Allen's go-to casting director. Take from that what you will. But what I will say is, this is a really good cast. I forget how many really good people are in this movie, even in and they each get a nice little moment, which I adore.
Victor Garber, Rosie O'Donnell, Rita Wilson.
So good. We also have Frances Conroy from 6 Feet Under.
And David Hyde Pierce.
David Hyde Pierce probably has my favorite line in the movie, which is, she said, we should either break up or get married. We got married.
I remember seeing that even as a kid and thinking that was funny. It's amazing.
His delivery is just so good. And I think, was this right before Frasier, or was this during the very early days of Frasier?
I feel like this was probably shot pre-Frasier, but came out early days.
Yeah.
I feel like when I saw it, I knew who he was from Frasier.
Okay.
But Frasier, I don't feel like had been. We could just look up the dates.
We could just look up the dates. I will say though that if this is kind of the role that launched him or helped launch him more into the mainstream, I can completely see why, because it's such a small part, but it's like you said, his delivery is so good. And he manages in 2 scenes to just be very funny. And
I will say that I looked it up, and Frasier season 1 premiered in 1993, which is the same year that Sleepless in Seattle came out.
Love it. Good year for David Hyde Pierce.
Yeah.
So tell me about the first time you saw the movie.
I actually saw this movie in the theater with my parents. I don't remember. I feel like my brothers went to see something else, and I went to see this with the parents.
Is this the say something gay about the movie? I feel like that could
No. I mean, maybe it should be. But
I love that.
I don't remember. I just remember that I saw this in the theater with my family.
Okay.
Both of my brothers might have been there as well.
Okay.
For some reason, I doubt it, because they would have been my older brother would have been 15. No, my straight older brother is not. A 15-year-old boy is not walking into Sleepless in Seattle.
Because I really like the mythology of your brothers going to something else, and little, barely teenage Brian being I want to see a Nora Ephron movie. I love it.
Well, Big was my favorite movie at the time. I had Big on VHS.
It's so good. And
it's a great movie. And also, P.S., I'm sure we'll get to it on this podcast at some point.
Oh, I would be very surprised if you didn't. And, Tom Hanks is just wonderful. And that is a truth universally acknowledged. In my case, I was 13 going on 14 and thought I was terribly mature. And I saw it on video around Valentine's Day. So I think So it was on video. So it had been out for several months. I did not see it in the theater. My mom was not a big fan of me watching the movie because Walter and Annie slept in the same bed and they weren't married. I brought this up to my mother today and she was like, oh, really? And I'm like, yeah. And I think I may have even said to you, like, Mom, I know it's okay. Like, I know. Like, but I loved the movie because it felt very adult to me. It was, and just when you're like 8th grade, when you're 13, well, maybe in my case, I was a weird, 30-year-old child. But I didn't want kid stuff. Like, this was grown-up problems. And also the soundtrack was really good. And I need to mention, Mark Shaman did the soundtrack for this and for When Harry Met Sally. He works a lot with Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner. He met Billy Crystal when Billy was on Saturday Night Live because Mark Shaman did some orchestrations or arrangements for that. And Mark Shaman has also did music for the musical Hairspray and for the TV series Smash. So he is a very familiar name. I did not realize he did both of our movies, but it totally makes sense because the soundtracks are both really lovely for these movies and have kind of an old-fashioned quality that's not dated, which is very hard to do.
They both have Harry Connick Jr.
Yes, they do.
Of course, he's a bunch of his renditions were used throughout When Harry Met Sally, and in this, his song "A Wink and a Smile," right? Yep. Is that the song?
Yep, it's
is featured heavily, and it was nominated for an Oscar.
I didn't know that.
I love this song. I do.
It's
I love
this song. Honestly, his rendition of "It Had to Be You" from When Harry Met Sally is my favorite rendition of that song of all time, and I love that song too. Yeah. And he does a great job in both movies. But a friend of mine, my best friend in junior high and high school, actually had the soundtrack to Sleepless in Seattle, and we played it a lot. Again, we were 30-year-old children, but the music is very good. Yeah. So I like to think I appreciated good writing and a good movie at a young age. It's okay.
Yeah, no, I like I said, I saw this in the theater, and I don't remember what led me to seeing it, but I feel like I had to have made the choice to at some point if my brothers went to see something else, but I don't remember. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation on my part.
Well, it was also you couldn't be a bigger star than Tom Hanks at this point. And, Meg Ryan was.
And I think too, it was probably Meg Ryan and When Harry Met Sally, I had seen it 1,000 times.
Oh yeah.
And it was from the writer of When Harry Met Sally. And I was okay. I want to see that. If my parents are going to let me see that, I'll see that. I feel like that was what it was, but I can't say for sure. I don't remember, but
I like that narrative. I think we should stick with it.
Perfect. Then that's what it was. That's what happened.
Then that's exactly what it was. No, they were both huge, respectively, at this time.
And like I said, at that point, I had seen When Harry Met Sally a lot.
Oh, yeah. And, also just, this is also a movie where you can totally see why Meg Ryan, got the America's Sweetheart reputation, because I feel in When Harry Met Sally, she's a similar character in a lot of ways. She kind of masks her feelings with perkiness and everything's fine. And, I have also read that that was kind of a big thing Nora Ephron did that Rob Reiner would kind of call her out on. But in When Harry Met Sally, I feel she's got a little more Spitfire quality in her. She gives it right back to Harry. Yeah. This one, she's a little more, not naive, but a little more wide-eyed. And I think this was more an America's Sweetheart role.
Where it's this is actually something that I wanted to talk about in regards to the two movies, is how it's kind of, and this is a romantic comedy trope, So much so that the Onion has made fun of it, but it's that stalkerish rom-com behavior.
Yeah.
And we never talked about how in When Harry Met Sally, when he and Jess are talking at that football game, he's like, I followed her home.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Harry Burns. What the fuck did you just do?
Yeah. Although I will say, like, not defending, okay, yeah, I get if there are straight men listening, like, please don't follow a woman ever. Like, that's really fucking creepy. I will say, though, that in the case of When Harry Met Sally, this is still his wife at that point.
Yeah.
And it's not like he doesn't like break into her apartment or anything like that. I mean, she has given him, and not, I don't know, I don't want to go in if she owes him an explanation or not, because I think like that's kind of complicated, but it's just, she is leaving him and he kind of doesn't know what's going on. And he suspects that there's more to the story. And so like, he like briefly trails her and like leaves it at that. Sleepless in Seattle, however.
She conspires with Rosie O'Donnell, and I want to come back to Rosie O'Donnell because I heart her in this movie.
I heart her.
But she conspires with Rosie O'Donnell to like, fly to the other side of the country, and she like crosses the street. And yeah, like what's interesting, and one of the things that I noticed, it took me probably until a couple years ago. I think it's 1,000 times before I like realized that like Tom Hanks and Sam and Jonah have two different narratives going on. Where,
they really do.
Where Sam has just kind of seen this woman in random spots and always just was kind of like, they had a vibe or whatever.
Yeah.
And then also his son is talking about this lady from Baltimore. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So he is reacting, and so at the end when and this is what took me until a few years ago, at the end when he's putting it together, he's like, oh, the lady from Baltimore is this lady I've been seeing, and so now it's perfect.
It's the same woman.
Yes.
Could totally happen in the movies.
It's that stalkerish behavior though.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I was really thinking about it too, and just like, we really talked about with When Harry Met Sally, that there is something in there so many of us can relate to. It can be a lot of different things, but it's like you said about truthful. There's a lot of truth in that movie for people who aren't necessarily straight or wanting to get married or who have very different thoughts on all of that than Harry and Sally. In Sleepless in Seattle, that movie requires a lot more suspension of disbelief, for one thing, and a lot more of, this is a movie. This is we know they're going to get together at the end somehow. We would not want this to happen in real life.
Right.
But we're going to just say, like, this is a movie. It's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan and Nora Ephron. It's fine.
Yeah.
I found myself doing that, and it wasn't, and not necessarily in a bad way. Like, we watch movies for escapism, and like, I'm not into superheroes, but a lot of my friends are, and it's just kind of like, would you really want your whole city in shambles because of Thanos? Like, probably not. But like, you watch it anyway and you enjoy it and you get into it. And that's
exactly, it's a movie. It's like this fantasy. And that's actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about in relation to this movie, because this came out in 1993 and Pulp Fiction came out in 1994. And Pulp Fiction is credited as being like so self-referential and all of that other stuff, but this whole movie, not only is it like a semi-remake of An Affair to Remember, everybody in the movie has seen An Affair to Remember, and they're doing all of that because of An Affair to Remember. It's like that super meta 90s period where everything was just referencing itself.
But you're right, though. Like, Pulp Fiction got a lot of credit for that. And it's just like, oh, but this was a year before Pulp Fiction. And it wasn't edgy and cool. So we're just, and
and they were talking about An Affair to Remember with Cary Grant, which that's not a real movie.
It's a real movie. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like,
Yeah.
and you know, we could do a whole podcast about film bros wanking about Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
you
I
know-
did an episode on Pulp Fiction. It
You
was
did.
mostly my queer bros wanking about.
And see, well, exactly. Like that's the kind of like wanking I approve of. But like in the meantime, I will wank over romantic movies like this. And I am not a romantic. Like anyone who knows me knows this about me, but I have a soft spot for this movie. Not as soft as the one I have for When Harry Met Sally, which, you know, yeah, that is all that, like you, it is one of my all-time favorite movies. But this one is also, you know, I watched it and I was like, this has a lot of charm, despite the fact that, yeah, like we would not want this happening in real life, especially because there is a child involved.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think, you know, you want to show up on the doorstep of a single father with a very small child, with an 8-year-old. Like, that is creepy. But at the same time, it's Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan and Nora Ephron. And Meg Ryan has beautiful hair in this, by the way. I still remember my mom seeing it in the theater and being like, oh my God, her hairstyles are amazing. And you know what? They really are. Like, she looks like a princess. Not in a Disney movie, but like in a real life princess sort of way. And that hair is mesmerizing.
Yes. Her hair is fantastic in both movies. I'm going to save that though.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm going to save that because that was going to be my Say Something Gay, was her outfits and style and everything about her.
That.
In When Harry Met Sally, I love every single one of those looks. I love the hat with the jacket and the shoulder pads.
God. Can you get more 1989? You cannot.
Into it. Just now, I'm like, I want that. Maybe I should do that for Halloween. Maybe I should be Sally.
Do it. I dare you. But yeah, we also let's talk Rosie O'Donnell too.
Yes, absolutely. She's I you know, and to use the parlance of our times, I stan Rosie O'Donnell.
I stan her forever. She's wonderful. It is funny watching Sleepless in Seattle now with her character Becky, who is always like bitching about, is it Rick?
My Rick.
Rick, yeah, and bitching about her exes too, all of whom are men. And it is kind of funny being like, oh Becky, like I think in about 5 years you're gonna have a realization, and you're gonna be living on a farm and with dogs, and I'm very excited for you. But yeah, Rosie O'Donnell is just really wonderful in this movie and so well cast. And like, another rom-com trope is the best friend, you know, and we see that in Sleepless in Seattle too. One of the best friends in this movie is Rob Reiner. As
the director, of course, of When Harry Met Sally. Just to spell it out for people. I know you know that, but just to spell it out.
But no, it's good to spell it out for people. But like, Rosie O'Donnell is she's lovely in this and just an absolute delight.
Yeah. And I like her, and it's almost, you could almost even sort of like imagine that this character has seen When Harry Met Sally. When she's saying things like, and it's one of my, this was a line that I was like, oh, you're talking about me, aren't you? And Rosie O'Donnell delivers it, and that's your problem. You don't want to fall in love. You want to fall in love in a movie.
Yes. And just, the way, it's like you said, the way she says it is amazing. And just, the writing of it. And I don't know, like, I think there is a lot of very Nora Ephron-esque wisdom in that line too. It's like, we all want to fall in love in a movie, but you know,
it's messier than that.
And it's harsher than that. And like, even in this movie, like we have mess and we have harshness, and you know, we have a man who has lost his wife, like tragically and suddenly, and has a young boy. And you know, there are some scenes where it's just like, oh my God, Sam is a really good dad, because you know, his son has nightmares and cries and, you know, just says more than once, like, I just really miss her. And he's just, you know, he's really supportive. You know, he goes and comforts his son, and he tells him, you know, I'll tell you, your mom used to be able to peel an apple in one long curly strip, which of course we have seen Meg Ryan do earlier in the movie. But I also just love that like he shares that with his son. Like, just here's something about your mom you might not have known. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, those scenes really, and you know, I am not a parent and I'm not even a kid person all the time, but the scenes with Sam and Jonah, like really, I think they hit me harder as I get older. I think maybe because like I have more friends who are parents now. I have a friend who has lost a spouse very suddenly. And it's just, I really appreciate that she has these like poignant moments, that Jonah is not just this like annoying little kid, that like he's got real feelings. And I think that's really nice.
I love Jonah.
Jonah's adorable.
And his best friend, Gabby Hoffman.
Gabby Hoffman. Okay, can we just say that, first of all, Uncle Buck is one of my family's favorite movies. We watch it all the time. It's another one that is still hilarious. She is in that and is very funny, which she was like a 6-year-old at the time. So that's, you know, still not a lot of child actors who are just genuinely funny. You also get the feeling that, like, I got the feeling with her character, Jessica, in this, who is very precocious and talks in initials. I just get the feeling, I'm like, I think Gabby Hoffman was just this way. And like,
yeah, probably.
That
was one of my notes, was that like that almost character was almost prescient in how she's talking in abbreviations, because I mean, I'm guilty of it myself. I send a lot of text messages and I sometimes don't speak and I don't type out I don't know anymore. I type out IDK.
IDK. Yep.
So it was interesting how that was kind of her thing from the very beginning, where she was like MFEO.
Made for each other. And the way Meg Ryan delivers that so dryly too is just perfect. My favorite Jessica moment though is the last one where, like, you know, Jonah has gone to New York to meet Annie at the top of the Empire State Building, like in An Affair to Remember. And Jessica's parents run a travel agency, so Jessica bought him the ticket on that very ancient 1990.
Yes. But I'm so glad you mentioned that. Go ahead.
Yes, I love it. But they even say, you know, Jessica, like, you've got to tell us where Jonah is. And she says, and why? And her dad goes, no way. And then Sam goes, that's NW. And it's just that, I love that moment. It's so good. And just Jessica's face is just like, I am over this shit. You all are idiots. Like, of course he is where he is. And like, Gabby Hoffman in that role. It's like, and you know, I don't always love child actors, but the two in here are perfect. They're just so good.
I love Gabby Hoffman. She's fantastic.
Her. We can also talk about like the 90s computers in this movie.
Yeah. I was just looking over my notes. Well, I do. I mean, we've barely touched on, I know we've talked briefly about the cast, but, and of course, Rosie O'Donnell, but Bill Pullman and Victor Garber. Both of them with like, Victor Garber.
Who I always forget is in this. And then, of course, like,
shows up.
And I'm like, oh my God, of course, Victor Garber. And he's, again, you know, I don't want to praise anything associated with Woody Allen for obvious reasons, but damn, his go-to casting director knows her shit, because every little part, like I said earlier, every little part in this movie is flawlessly cast. And Victor Garber as Sam's friend from Chicago, who is married to Rita Wilson, who of course is Tom Hanks' wife in real life. And the scene where they talk, where Rita Wilson describes An Affair to Remember to these two dudes, who then wax poetic about the Dirty Dozen in a way that only straight men can, is just, it's a scene that like probably could have been cut for time. Probably just could have, other than Jonah overhearing the plot to An Affair to Remember, like it doesn't have a ton to do with the rest of the movie, but I love it so fucking much. It is so funny. And all three actors, Tom Hanks, Victor Garber, and Rita Wilson, are just giving it their all, and they come off like real friends who have known each other for a long time, that they can give each other shit and sort of like tease each other about like, oh yeah, I cried at the Dirty Dozen, and like they're kind of making fun of her, and it's such a wonderful scene.
But it gets the information to Jonah, but also you get to know those characters a little bit more.
Yeah.
In the same way that like in When Harry Met Sally, we had that scene where they play win, lose, or draw, basically, or Pictionary, or whatever it is.
Right.
I can't believe I forgot to say Baby Fish Mouth.
Baby Fish Mouth is sweeping the nation.
Exactly. It's those scenes that don't necessarily add to the plot, but they add to the characterization, and they add to why these films endure.
I think my writing often shows, and what I like to read and view and consume, is that I like characters over plot. Like I want to meet people and see where they go. And of course, plot is important. Both of these movies also, like Sleepless in Seattle is not even an hour and 40 minutes. Like both of these movies are very tightly plotted too, but it never feels like super contrived or anything. It does feel like, and maybe a little more so in Harry Met Sally, but it feels like, yeah, we are following these characters. We are getting to know these people. And it's something I think that really stands out about Ephron's writing, that she can do like a tight screenplay, but you feel like you know these people. And that's a very hard thing to do.
I had a lot more notes for Sleepless in Seattle than I did for When Harry Met Sally, because I just wrote this down, and I just wanted to make sure we say it. The soup Nazi from Seinfeld is mentioned. Are you aware of this?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
The Office, when you first meet Rosie O'Donnell's character and her two male coworkers are talking about how there's this soup guy that's like so mean, but the soup is great. He was later the soup Nazi on Seinfeld.
Amazing.
And I love that scene. That scene is one of my favorites. And I love that it's like so early in the movie too, because it's just like that whole line of dialogue about the statistic about, well, it's easier to get killed by a terrorist than it is to get married over the age of 40. And then that whole line of dialogue, well, it feels true because it is true. But my favorite line of all of it is did anybody read that book all the way through? Like, yes, because the guy's just like, really, are we debating this? Nobody read this book. We read about this book.
For me, that is just another one of those just really good character moments. Like that could have been cut out, but it's just because I think like the whole soulmates thing and like the unlikeliness, like you get it, like the point gets across, like in other ways. But again, like it's just some factoid like that, and how everyone reacts to it, and like the defense mechanisms they all have up, like it tells you so much.
Yeah, and that's the scene where she's just randomly thinking, and she's like, why do they say that you were widowed? Why don't you say that they were widowed?
Which is also such a writer thing to say too, which I was like, way to go, Nora. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have had conversations like that with my mom and my sister, who are both writers too. And it's just, I don't know. That's a moment I love.
One of the things I love about Nora Ephron, and she did this a little bit in When Harry Met Sally too, is there's a line when she's at Sharper Image, when Harry Met Sally. There's a line when Sally is at Sharper Image and she's like, well, we should have just gone to the plant store. And all of that drama happens. And then later you cut to her and she's carrying a plant.
You're right.
And it's these weird little moments that like inform stuff later. And the one that really got me was in Sleepless in Seattle, which I think is a sort of a more exaggerated example. But it's when he's talking to Jonah about like, oh, well, you can't. This is another one though that's like very Seinfeldian, and it's very like, but it's like you can't ask a woman to dinner because if it goes poorly, you're stuck there. So you have to ask to drinks. And then later he's calling that woman and he's like, you want to do drinks? And then she ups the ante.
Yeah.
And I love the
dinner.
way that's one of my favorite things about her writing is that it's not every joke is a punchline, but stuff that's funny references itself.
Yes.
And that's where the humor comes from. And that's why we wish people talk like this, because
yes,
it's that sort of intelligent line of that intelligent way of speaking.
It's also because like she's really good at one-liners, as even evidenced by this episode where we're constantly quoting her one-liners. But yeah, you're right with like, she kind of carries she does like little through lines and stuff like that with humor too. And it's not just she's not a one-trick pony. Like
right.
she's
a writer. It's like every word out of these characters' mouths is there for a reason, and it informs something later. And I would say that's true of both movies.
Exactly. And every word out of every character's mouth sounds like something that character would say.
Yeah.
Which is another thing where, you know, taking writing classes, like voice is always a big thing, where it's just like, would this specific person say this specific thing? And like in both movies, she is very good at that.
Yeah.
Even Walter making like dad jokes when they're registering in New York. I forget what it is right now, but it's just like, oh God, it's when they're ordering champagne and he says, can we have some Dom DeLuise? And it's just like, that is such a fucking Walter thing to say. And the fact that like, he's not in a ton of scenes, but it's just, we know that person and like, we know him very well by then, that it's just like, oh God. And it's not just there as almost kind of the last straw for Sally, but it's just like, this is the guy he is. This is that guy. You are right that if it weren't Sam, it would be someone else, but this is the guy who is just absolutely not right for her. Whether you believe in soulmates or the one or not, like, girl, you cannot marry this man. Like, it's just, you're not a fit. You're just not. Bottom line, we love Nora Ephron, and she's, as we have said over and over and over, she's a writer, and you know, her movie, both of these movies just really indicate that she's very funny and she's very real. And you know, just these films, they're beautifully cast, they're really nicely filmed, they've got lovely scores, but above all, the writing.
No, that's exactly right. The writing, the characters, like the acting and the way they embody these characters all plays into one another. I do think that When Harry Met Sally is the superior film. Like I said, it's probably top 5 for me. Like, it's probably like one of the few movies that I would identify as being perfect or close to it.
Agreed.
Whereas I sure love Sleepless in Seattle, but it's not the same.
It really isn't. Like, it is more a product of its time. And it is a very big throwback to An Affair to Remember. It's very self-referential to that, which is, you know, another movie that was a product of its time. And, you know, there are some problematic situations, but it is one where we're just like, we love it. Like,
I did want to make sure to quote my favorite line in the whole movie, or I don't know if I feel like I've probably said that a couple times by now, but
don't go rolling in poison ivy as soon as I leave the house, or lock yourself in a closet, or do anything that makes you need stitches. If your finger falls off, it's staying off. No one's gonna pack it on ice and take it to the hospital so you can be a breakthrough in laser surgery. Is this about that woman in Baltimore?
Annie.
Good, fine. I'll tell you what I'm doing this weekend. I'm getting laid. 1990s, and nobody is getting laid. I'm the only man in America who was getting laid this weekend, and I haven't been laid that much. 6 girls in college, maybe 7. How long have you been standing there?
Forever.
What did you hear me just say?
6 girls in college, maybe 7.
7. 8! Mary Kelly.
This is the one I like.
Jonah, the fact is, you're not going to like any woman because it isn't your mother.
How do you know? What's wrong with Annie?
Oh, Jonah, shut up!
Shut up? Shut up? Mom never said shut up to me. Mom never yelled at me.
The conversation is finished.
Why can't we go to New York?
There is no way that we are going on a plane to meet some woman who could be a crazy, sick lunatic. Didn't you see Fatal Attraction?
You wouldn't let me.
Well, I saw it, and it scared the shit out of me. It scared the shit out of every man in America.
And the funny thing about that line is I also remember my parents going to Fatal Attraction when I was a child.
Yeah.
Naturally, Sans Children, because that is not a children's movie. I still have never seen it, but you know, I know the gist. I knew the gist pretty young, and just the gist freaked me out. So yeah, I have also always loved that exchange in Sleepless in Seattle.
Scared the shit out of every man in America.
And in America.
And you know, I feel like that's probably true at the time.
Oh yeah.
Well, we've been gushing about these two movies, but did you have a say something gay for either of them?
I mean, my say something gay, it is along the line of, you know, when we were complimenting Meg Ryan's hair, I especially love in When Harry Met Sally, the last kind of 2 hairstyles she has, like where she has the loose curls and then she has the tighter curls. They both look beautiful on her. And I love
the final one. Like was that feathered or whatever that is?
Yes,
I love that.
Impeccable. I also really like her party dresses in this movie. She's got like a really nice like black dress going on with like a twirly skirt and just off the shoulders. And it's very of its time, but it's still very pretty. And I love like the kind of midnight blue numbers she's got like at the end of the movie, and just stellar costuming. My say something gay for Sleepless in Seattle. There's a lot of gay in this movie. There's David Hyde Pierce and Victor Garber and Rosie O'Donnell. I would encourage anyone who's listening, even if you're not a fan of the L Word or its reboot spinoff Generation Q, which why the hell aren't you? Please watch the first episode of the 2nd season of Generation Q, because that is the debut of Rosie O'Donnell's character as one of the other main characters' ex's fiance, whose name is Carrie, and who is a butch lesbian, and who is the most awkward yet most sincere character on the show. You will want to die for Carrie. And I'm just so happy that Rosie O'Donnell is just playing this very sincere butch lesbian who just wants her fiance to be happy.
Aw. Rosie O'Donnell plays herself, or perhaps a version of herself, in a few episodes of Curb Your Enthusiasm. And one of my favorites is she and Larry David both meet Amy Brenneman. The episode is called The Bisexual. And
okay, that one.
They both get her number like independently, and then they're like fighting over who gets her.
Well, now I have to watch it. That's amazing.
It's amazing. It's really good. I want to say season 8, but I could be wrong. And then there's one where I don't remember what happens, but he pisses off a bunch of people in wheelchairs.
Oh no!
And then he runs up some stairs to get away from them. And then Rosie comes in and she's like, "Don't worry, guys, I got this." And she like runs up the stairs after him.
And
and that's the end of the episode. But I feel like it's implied that she goes and beats him up.
Well, of course she does, because she's fucking Rosie O'Donnell, and we love our butch queen.
Yeah.
How about you? Got anything gay?
My say something gay. You mentioned her hair, but I have to mention the fashion of one Sally Albright.
Love it.
It's the jacket with the shoulder pads. It's the hat.
Yes.
It's the glasses at the, oh my God, the whole outfit at the bookstore.
When someone is staring at her in personal growth.
If I was going to do a Sally costume, that would be what I would.
Now you have to. So
I don't know if I have to, because I can delete this and no one will know. if it was like June, I could probably be like, okay, but it's real soon. So I don't know. But that'd be fun. It would be fun. It'd be fun. I'm gonna file it away.
File it away.
File it away. Probably not this Halloween though. Yeah, so my Say Something Gay is just Meg Ryan and her fashion and the incredible
I love it.
way she's dressed throughout the movie. Someone is staring at you in personal growth, indeed.
Another one of Nora's impeccable dialogue.
That reminds me, I'm glad you said that. It reminds me of what is surely a Carrie Fisher written dialogue, which is asking about, I don't remember the name of the woman, but she is described by Carrie Fisher as thin, pretty, big tits. Your basic nightmare. That is a Carrie Fisher line.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah.
And good for Nora for being like, yes.
Right. Again, I would have got to have been on the set with those two. And then, of course, if you're there with those two, Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal and Rob Reiner. And
I mean, that's the kind of thing, like a time machine. Yeah, I'd use it for that.
For sure. Yeah. Just a perfect, like we said, I think it's a perfect lightning in a bottle kind of movie. And then Sleepless in Seattle is real cute. It's real cute and sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on and finally talking about these two movies. I know it's like we talked about at the top. There are two films that you and I have been itching to discuss. So I'm so happy we finally got it in the books. And so thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to exploring more Nora Ephron with you down the line. In the meantime, do you want to share your social media?
I would love to. So I have a book coming out on September 14th. It is called Two Winters. It is a queer young adult reimagining of Shakespeare's The Winter's Tale. Some of it is set in Catholic school. It's real gay. So you can pre-order that now. And I hope Brian will link to it in the show notes. You can follow me on Facebook at Lauren Emily Writes. You can follow me on Twitter at Lauren Emily Rye, WRI. You can follow me on Instagram at Lauren Emily Writes, and I hope you will.
Thank you so much. You can find the podcast at Piece of Pie Pod on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. I am So Brian Rowe. That's Brian with an I, ROWE on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd. Give me a follow over there. I'm making lists and writing reviews and having a lot of fun with it. And in the meantime, I hope you subscribe. We've got some fun Halloween pairings coming and some more stuff planned. So subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Get vaccinated, everybody.